Part two, and data and methods. And so we'll look at some key questions in etymological research, plus ethnohistorical factors and implications. To me, it is not enough to just ask, where do the words come from? I think you have to understand where the words come from, you have to understand how people uh, kept their words or shared their words or borrowed others' words, and this requires more information than linguistic information. Um, an overview of modern data sources for etymological research in and around Vietnam. Again, in Vietnam and around Vietnam, you need all of them. And I will talk about textual data and reconstructed lexicons and ethnohistorical information again, and methods of data analysis. And I am not going to teach you historical phonology and semantics. I mentioned the borrowability before, if you remember that, that the borrowability rate in that website, the world database of loanwords, or database of world loanwords. The borrowability rate for fog was low. Borrowability rate for hat, the word for hat, very high. That's a factor to consider. And then interdisciplinarity and other factors. So these are the things I would like to cover. Again, I'll give some examples. So the central questions in etymology and inferences that we can make based on this is, in terms of word origin, what is a word's status? Lexical retentions from an earlier period. Now I'm talking about Vietnamese, of course, an earlier period in Austroasiatic or Vietic, right? We've seen Austroasiatic and in mainland Southeast Asia and India and the islands there, where the Nicobarese Islands there, Nicobars, I mean, or Vietic. Okay, and we know Vietic doesn't just mean Vietnamese, right? It means that group of languages. And then loan words, some other status is a loan word from another language. And and then there can be innovations, right? We have retentions, we have innovations, and we can talk about innovations in Viet Minh or Vietnamese dialects sometimes as well. I am not going to discuss all of the Vietnamese dialects, but that is another area that we have to consider. And I sometimes look at dialect data. As for native words, right, these lexical retentions, which are from a shared proto-language stage. So Vietnamese, Dan, from Proto-Austroasiatic, something like dang, okay, to weave. Okay, that word dan is a true Proto-Austroasiatic language, and I will show you more later. Not yet, but I'll show you this, how we know that. I can show you how we can know that, or how we can hypothesize it. Ultimately, we can never know, but we can certainly provide support. And which of these words were spread regionally, maybe in a later period? Okay, so that word non, conical hat, I I suspect, and I will show you why, I think that that word is not in Proto-Austroasiatic, but it is in other Austroasiatic languages. And that means that that word was probably shared by Austroasiatic groups, and in fact, into Ding Jam as well. Oh, yes, I will talk about Ding Jam later. I forgot. But not borrowing into Vietic, but from Austroasiatic. I think that's the way to talk about Ding Jam. Oh, good. I got an idea that I can use later. So, again, is it from this proto-language stage? So that would mean, Proto-Austroasiatic, that would mean 4,000 years ago or more for this word weave. And by the way, there is archaeological evidence of weaving from 4,000 years ago. So we have some archaeological evidence that at least tells us it is possible that this word could be that old. And then some were spread regionally. Okay, conical hat. I'll talk about that more at the end of the. I have in the last hour. I'll talk about hat specifically. As for loanwords, approximately when were they borrowed? Right, we want to ask that question. So Vietnamese vàng, it's yellow or gold, and it is most likely from Old Chinese. And I'm not going to try to pronounce this here, but that's the Old Chinese reconstruction. You can't pronounce this because it's not a specific sound, but whatever. In what socio-cultural circumstances were they likely borrowed? And so I'm not going to talk about it right now. I've written about it a little bit. I've written about the words vàng, yellow gold, and bạc, which is, silver, which is related to white. And I've written about that and some of the issues of metals and such. Okay, but those are the kinds of questions we ask. Okay, now what does all of this reveal about the socio-cultural history of speakers of ancestral stages of modern Vietnamese? Okay, so right, so I'm focusing on Vietnamese, and so that's why I'm going to keep saying Vietnamese, and so that's my question. Overall approach is the weight of evidence. The stronger the weight of the evidence, and then we test hypotheses. And we can have multiple hypotheses. I can have three different hypotheses, but I can say this is the best one. This one has the most evidence. This is not so good. It has less evidence. And we never, almost never, have absolute certainty. So if I say, yes, they borrowed the word for hat, can you prove it? Well, no, because I do not have a time machine. I have to mention this. Even archaeologists cannot prove things, right? They cannot prove things. They do not have time machines. So we cannot go back and know with absolute certainty, but we can use weight of evidence and we can test hypotheses. All right. This is a kind of scientific approach that I'm talking about for etymology. So the data sources. Um, oops, where are we? Okay. All right. What time is it? Okay. Data sources. All right. Textual data, and we sometimes talk about philology. I'm mentioning that first because that's very traditional to look at textual data for etymology. But as I will show you, that is not enough at all. It is one piece. It is an important piece. It is not enough. Lexical data of modern languages and dialects. The more, the better. This is what I think is extremely important for people to understand. And when I say modern languages, I don't mean 5 modern languages and dialects. We mean ultimately hundreds upon hundreds of languages if we're really checking. Reconstructions of proto-languages. And that word reconstruction, I have not given a definition. You have seen it, right? So that word for fog you saw before, and those, what was the sound of like, I don't know, in the distant past, based on a comparison with various languages. Okay, the reconstructions of proto languages sounds. We can look at, how consonants and vowels, words, and grammar, the kind of various aspects. And a sample, the kind of an interesting website is this website here. I'll take a look at it, of English etymology, and you just enter, let's say, father, and then you get this kind of discussion, and they say Old English father and that kind of thing, and it says Proto-Germanic, and they give some examples. And down here, oh, okay, they're talking about, for people who are in historical linguistics, we know Grimm's law and this is Proto-Indo-European, this is not food, haha, Proto-Indo-European. So, okay, that's an example of etymology. By the way, watch out for this website. I think it's a good one, and I think you can't trust things, and you have to check them yourselves, of course. Uh, Okay, but that's textual data, lexical data from modern languages, and reconstructions. Those are all very important. Ethnohistorical data, historical texts, archaeological studies, ethnographic information. Okay, so this is enough, I think. Well, sorry, it's never enough, but this is the minimum, I think, the minimum that someone should have right? I spoke before. There is no Proto-Vedic pineapple because pineapples did not exist in Southeast Asia. They were not in Southeast Asia 2,000 years ago. They were not there 1,000 years ago, right? They were from Central America or something, South America, a few hundred years ago or 400 years ago. We don't know, but there was no Proto-Vedic, so we have to check that. Each area of this 1, 2, 3, 4 is limited when considered on its own, but their combination increases, oops, I made a mistake there, increases the weight of evidence, right? So if we only have one of these, the weight of evidence is insufficient. And when we put them all together, we can check things, we can compare things. Sometimes, though, like in that fog example, I was not able to give an answer. I was able to say, here is this data, but I cannot know. There is no ethnohistorical, there is no archaeological data for fog. So we cannot check that. There is not archaeological records of fog 2,000, 3,000 years ago. Now, we can check, I guess, geoclimate things, but anyways, they're limited separately, but they're great together. Okay, so let's talk about these textual sources. I mentioned those different sources, right? Okay, so there are these gnome texts, and I should say Han Nom, but that's okay. We'll focus on the gnome because that's closest to Vietnamese, the source of Vietnamese pronunciation, or connected to Vietnamese pronunciation, right? Uh, for the GNOME texts, they're in scattered resources, and you can find some digital sources, but it's not a database that I've seen where you can just search in the database for certain words, which is, you can do that for Chinese. I'll show you that source. Online GNOME characters, yes, you can check the GNOME characters, and I think there's another one, but this is fine, right? This is a good one, and so we'll get our word do, and then you get this, and oh, okay, that's very helpful. This kind of thing is fine, and you can check, of course, the old dictionaries. Paper. I still have my paper dictionaries. I don't use them anymore. I don't know what to do with paper dictionaries. This is useful primarily for exploring archaic and Middle Vietnamese, and don't worry about that, but that means in previous centuries, right? In the second millennium, pronunciations and semantico-syntactic developments. This might help a little bit. It doesn't help so much with ancient, really ancient periods before more than 1,000 years ago, because Gnome, as you know, Gnome texts, maybe the 1200s is where we get some good Gnome texts, right? People argue about the time of Gnome when it is, but the fact is, if I want a big text, um, I suddenly forgot the name of the one that I've used before. Anyways, they don't go back too far. That's okay. Romanized writings since the 17th century, such as Diderot's 1651 dictionary, and it's the same. We can learn about Middle Vietnamese pronunciation, and that's useful, but that's not too ancient. Other Han Viet dictionaries, of course, online Han Viet dictionaries, those are always helpful. I don't know if this is my favorite one. I like this one. And let me see, I'll just get a quick character there. Oops, I popped in the wrong thing there. Is this thing in here? Oh, I still have to get that out of here. Well, I'll just type. Uh, so, what's wrong? Oh, I forgot. There we go. I'm doing it wrong. Oh, I see. It doesn't like this one, but I'll take the word qua since it's conveniently located there. Okay, there we go. And then you can check and that sort of thing, right? So there's resources, fine. And of course, there are online Chinese text sources. The cText database is pretty easy to use. That's the one I use most often for checking things. And what can I check with this? Well, I can check for, how old words are in Chinese. So it's helpful in determining how old such words are in Chinese, and therefore could possibly have been borrowed in earlier periods, but it's not direct verification of Chinese loanwords. But I do need to be able to check this to see, is this word uh, does this was this word used before the Han Dynasty, for example? That's important. If I cannot find it in an early period, I am not certain about it. And so it's important to check. Some words, came into Chinese a little bit later. That's all. Okay. Let's see here. So Okay, so these textual sources, they are useful, but this is not enough. This is something I must check. Some of it is important. I have to exclude. This can help me to exclude. And oh, by the way, here's the the one over there in Taiwan, there, the Academia Sinica. And so this one is very good. And of course, we want the free one. I'm not going to pay. Okay, so um, I'm too cheap. All right. So, reconstructions of regional language groups. We are in a time where there are more reconstructions of languages. It's very, very, very important to understand that these reconstructions are tell us that they have looked at many languages. So these words, when we're looking at those reconstructed words, it's not just one word, sorry, not just one language, but it's in many languages. And then they compare the many languages and they try to reconstruct the word. And this also means that the word may be much, much, much older. So it tells us that it's not something from, you know, 100 years ago or 200 years ago, that it might be 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago or 3,000 years ago. And I'm not going to open up these. But this Proto-Austroasiatic is a useful reference for ProtoDye. We also have other related ones, Protocli and Protocla. You don't have to worry about that, but I'll show you samples of what these things look like. I'm not going to. This is just in the PowerPoint. And Old Chinese and Middle Chinese. I use Baxter and Cigar's work, and it's pretty good. But I sometimes check Schussler's work. Is it 2007 or 2009? And then I have not used Zhang. I have it, but I don't really use it very much. And I use the more recent works, and they're easy to search. And this is an Excel spreadsheet. It's very easy. So I'm checking these. You have to check these. Proto-Chamic. Okay, so I do check Chamic. I check it to make sure. And Proto-Hmong Mian. I mentioned the Mian before, but Proto-Hmong Mian. And so this is very important. These are, if you want to understand etymology of Vietnamese, you have to check all of these. Oh, I forgot. Well, then these are like books. So this is a PDF. This is a PDF. This is a PDF. Okay. There are databases for these. Okay, lexical databases. So not just these reconstructions. Mon Khmer, that is Austroasiatic Etymological Dictionary. Now this one's very important, and I am going to show it to you. Okay, there we go. So let's try the word weave. Okay. So as you can see, these are by the way, there are 13 branches of Austroasiatic. See these here? These are the 13 branches. And I'm going to search for the word weave. Okay. And as it is searching, whoops, am I done it right? What's going on? There we go. Okay, it found 683 items. Okay, just think about that for a second. I've searched for the word weave and I found 683 items. It doesn't mean all of them are sometimes the word weave is part of another word or another definition. Okay, but that means there's a lot of data. Okay, we don't just look at two languages and say, those look similar. We have to look at large numbers. And so up here are the reconstructions, and look, there it is. There's that dang word. And the reason I'm saying ing is because of this N. This symbol means that it is what we call palatalized. And don't worry about that too much, but it's not just plain N, but a different kind of N. And we can see these different branches. This word here, tang, let's take a look. So here's Aslian, which is down in Malaysia. And oh, there it is. See that? Oh, there it is. Oh, there it is. Slightly different vowels, but we can see that it is there. And we have to understand the history of these vowels to understand them. I'm not an expert on Aslian, but I think it's pretty safe. We can understand that. Here are reconstructions in Bah Narok. That's in Vietnam, in southern central Vietnam. Here's Katuic, the one I mentioned before. Oh, there it is. Thang. I'm not going to go through all of them. This word is in every one of these languages. Oh, I'm sorry, every one of these branches, including Munda. Munda is the one that's in India. So all the way from Vietnam, all the way to India, all of them. Okay, I want to impress upon you. I forgot this is only 12 of the branches. Here's the 13th. Don't ask me why this is a separate database. They made it at the time, and that's what happened. It should be one database, but you have to check both. That means this word is really ancient in Austroasiatic, okay? Certainly more than 4,000 years old. And as I mentioned before, there is some historical archaeological evidence. In Vietnam, there's a Vietnamese language publication, and they show imprints of the woven materials that they used on pottery from the Phum Nguyen culture. And so it's truly, truly ancient. And here is Vietnamese. Sorry, Vietic. Here's Vietic Dang again. In Vietnamese, Dan. Okay. So great. Yeah, okay. This is what you have to check. Okay. Those textual sources don't give us that information. Sino-Tibetan Etymological Dictionary. I will not show it to you as we don't have time, but you must check it, and it's very challenging to use and for a variety of reasons. Here's a database for ProtoDye. I mentioned it before, but this database is very helpful if you want to check this one. Here, I'll show it to you because it's very quick. Let's just take a quick look. I'll do weave, search, and uh-oh, we look at this and we go, what's this? It looks sort of similar, but it has a different consonant, M, and it has a tone category, B. Uh-oh, even if you thought it looks similar, it doesn't. That M is totally different from that palatal nasal, and this tone category is totally the wrong tone category because it would have a different sound in Austroasiatic. So I'm going to tell you, you go, oh, it looks similar. It is partial similarity. It is chance partial similarity. Okay. So this is why you have to understand historical phonology or else you will waste a lot of time. Blessed Austronesian, I showed you that before. We saw that for fog, the kabut there, that's a very useful database. And then I don't know if you know this, but the Sealand collection of Southeast Asian dictionaries. Take a look at this. If you haven't seen this before, here you go. Look at this. Oh, here's Javanese. Ooh, we can check it. Let's try it. I didn't think we would need it. Let's see what happens here. Oh, I've hit reset. There we go. Okay, there we go. So let's see. Anything that's close to Yeah, see, it's going to find everything that's related to weaving. So this is a very powerful kind of search approach. Yes, but I don't think we're going to see a thing. Well, let's see. Dangok. No, no, no. Okay, anyways. Oh, I should have checked fog. That's right. That's the one we wanted. Okay. Oh, before, who was that who was asking me about the fog word and was it Javanese? Is that what you were saying before? That was That's okay. I don't want to spend more time. We'll lose time. Was this the one? But anyways, nothing here looks like the Kamuk form. Okay. Oops. And then I didn't mean to close that. Just in case you didn't know about this, these are, and of course there's Vietnamese. Okay. Yes, there we go. It's a very powerful one. I found it very useful because it doesn't just find one word; it finds everything. Well, here I'll do this one. Weave. If you want to explore, you need to be able to see multiple. Uh, uh, there we go. And so here's one kind of weave, ben, And I know that that one is an early Chinese loanword. That's from Chinese bian. I don't know where Z comes from. Um, I don't know. I don't even know that word. Oh, I don't know that. Interesting. And here's the Dan. There we go. Okay. Okay. So just so that you can see, there's a lot of resources. South Asian dictionaries, and you got to check the Sanskrit and Pali and Hindi. Oh my gosh, this is where it gets very complicated. And as you can see, there are a lot of resources. I'm just going to pause briefly here um, for emphasis. I just want to point out that is a lot of data, isn't it? It's not just looking at a couple of languages. So, looking at just a couple of languages, you are one of the blind men and you are holding the tusk of the elephant, and that's it. And you're going to think it's a snake. Okay? You're not even going to think that because it's so small. You have to look at a lot more. So, I mean, and of course, you have to know how to look at it. You have to have some knowledge about historical phonology and historical semantics. Um, or you're going to make claims that are not supported by the data. Okay. It's just, warning. Guntan, be careful. Okay. Um, oops. Oh, there we are. Okay, what time is it? Where am I? Okay, ethnohistorical. All right, where am I? Okay. So now you probably ethnohistorical data and studies. I'm sure you've heard of the Baiyue, the Bac Viet, and the Jiaozhi region, and then the subsequent Vietnamese dynasties. That is part of what is in various types of textual data. And then there are the historical and legendary descriptions, such as the Van Lang kingdom and the Olak and that sort of thing, Ouyue. And this is there's it's hard to get. There are limits, lots of. It's very limited, right? The semi legendary, almost like legend, almost history. The texts that describe them, they're very brief. They don't provide much information, little details. um, what we need is archaeological data because there's a lot more information there. And so the archaeological cultures, I don't know if you've ever seen them, but they from the Fum Win about 4,000 years ago, Dam Do Mun Dam Sun. I'm sure you've heard of Dam Sun, of course, and those magnificent bronze drums and that sort of thing. Um, but there is also archaeological studies in general of neighboring southern China, mainland Southeast Asia, material culture, archaeobotany, zoo archaeology, archaeogenetics. Now they've been studying more with genetics from the remains of these ancient places. Sorry, ancient remains of humans. Lots of information there that we have to that I keep sifting. I'm not an archaeologist, but I have lots of good archaeological friends to ask because if I don't ask them, I'm going to make strange claims. I have to do my reading and I have to check with archaeologists. Ethnographic data, descriptions of modern ethnic groups in the region. So these are your sources. This is what we have to do. We have to look at some of these things. And but a quick thought: ethnohistorical studies should ideally include historical linguistic data. And I do see it. I see some archaeological studies that they use linguistic data occasionally. Um, Usually, though, what archaeologists do is they talk about language families, and then we'll talk about the Austronesian people spreading into the Pacific Ocean, the islands of the Pacific, and they will talk about um, groups that produce rice moving from the Yangtze, from the Changjiang down into Southeast Asia, those kinds of things. And they talk about language groups sometimes, but I think words can also be very useful. There are some archaeologists that use it though. There's some have done so. So what is the method? What are some of the methods and protocol of the data analysis? So check all lexical sources. This means it takes time. This takes time, checking all of them. And I've shown you that's a lot. Focus on the proto-language sources. Don't focus on the modern languages. Focus on the proto, because those mean that those are probably widespread. Many languages have those words so that you can reconstruct them. However, you cannot trust all reconstructions, but at least I think focusing on them is useful. It's important. It means it's probably something ancient in the language. And we want to find phonological patterns. I will show samples of this. You are I think most of you are not historical phonologists. A couple of people in the audience are, but most of you are not. I will show you what a phonological pattern looks like in a little bit. But you have to have them. If you don't have them, you don't have good data. Minimize semantic flexibility. And when I say semantic flexibility, I mean, well, it looks like fog, and then here's a word that means dew, D-E-W. Dew is kind of like fog. Are they related? We have to be careful about that. Sometimes semantics change. Words change their meanings, but we have to be careful not to be too flexible. Otherwise, it's not as consistent. Consider the ethnohistorical patterns, and I've been emphasizing any information you can find about ethnohistory and archaeology is useful, can be useful. Seek groups of words in cultural domains. I will give examples of this, but I will simply say, for example, clothing. Say, well, what are the words in clothing? Are they native, or are they borrowed, or are they mixed? What kinds of words? So when we can find them in cultural domains, I will show samples of what that means in a little bit. I mentioned that borrowability. Be aware of the possibility of chance similarity, especially partial similarity. Be aware, and I will show you samples of it. Okay, this is the very dangerous thing because many smart people look at similarity and they think that the similarity has meaning, but there is a lot of chance, accidental similarity that means nothing. It's because human languages are related. I mean, all humans speak languages. We use a lot of the same sounds, and sometimes the sounds are similar. That's just the statistical possibility. So, checking all available sources. Okay, remember, so I'm going to give you an example of checking. So if we just look at the Vietnamese word gạo for husked, uncooked rice there, and we see this word, this Thai word, just Thai, not Dai, but Thai, the cow, kin cow. And then we look at this ProtoDye word, and I'm not going to pronounce it there, but that one you can say, oh, okay, it kind of looks like that. Did Vietnamese get this word from Thai, or did it get it from Dai? And well, let's check some more sources. Let's check some Austroasiatic words. Oh, and look at this. Here are 8 branches. Remember, there are 13 branches, and we can see here this like look at the Cossack language there, cow, okay, and then Khmeric, oh, Ngaw, and the Khmuic. You can see there are other words that are like that, okay, Rumko, Nko, Nko, Nkal, okay, and then Monic and Caw. I think you can start to see some patterns. I am not going to explain all of them, but I think you can see what's happening a little bit. So some of these have 2 syllables, right? So Angkor for Cambodian, but some of them just have the 1 syllable, like the Palaungic over here, down here. But then some of the Palaungic languages do have 2 syllables, Rukok, Rukok. Okay. So some of them have this R sound, this N sound, and we can start to, there's a way to reconstruct this and get a. But now let's look at Vietic. Okay, next is Vietic. Now I check Vietic and I see some languages like the Ving dialect. It's got apparently 2 different pronunciations. Here's Mung there. Okay, fine. But do you see the green ones down here? These are in what I'm calling the archaic Vedic languages, because these are the ones that can have two syllables, because Vietnamese only has one syllable roots, but these languages can have bisyllabic roots, and we can see that these are connected to these other Austroasiatic languages. This is how we can see these other Vedic languages help us to connect Vietnamese and Hmong to these other languages. Okay, so and we can see there that this Thai word with one syllable doesn't give much, and even the ProtoDye form, it looks pretty limited. In fact, some people speculate that, and we don't know for certain, that the Austroasiatic word, which would be something like Rumko, right, something like that, was the source and borrowed into dye. And so this is certainly possible. So we have to check all available sources and not just look at a few and guess. Now, of course, I'm not showing you other data. I'm not showing you Sino-Tibetan and Hmong-Mien and those others. I can tell you this is not in those languages. This is not in Sino-Tibetan. This is not in Austronesian. This is not in Hmong-Mien. It is in Proto-Dye and it is in Proto-Austroasiatic. Oh, I forgot. Remember Munda is in India? That means this word is very old. It was if it was brought by Munda people to India, then it is very old. It is not something that was borrowed into Vietnamese. That is just not, that's not what the data shows. The data show this very strong data here. Okay, focus on proto-language reconstructions for deep history. So, um, so here's that Proto-Austroasiatic, and here it is, Rakau. I suspect that we need to reconstruct that differently. This is Shorto's reconstruction. Looking at it now, I think it should have something else, not just the R, but I don't know. Who knows? Maybe I have to think about it more. Okay, but here's what happens if you don't focus on the Proto-Austroasiatic source. You might think that the Gao comes from Dai, but it does not. Here's some other samples. Here is English to die, and the Thai word to die is Thai. Well, it sounds almost like English. Are they related? And of course not. We know that that's not related, but we have to look. And if we see a Proto-Dye language, it's something like Patai. In fact, I'm actually going to mention in Austronesian, it's something like Matai for the Proto-Austroasiatic word. It might be, but anyways, that's another issue. But as you can see by looking at this Proto-Dye reconstruction, we can see, oh yes, no, of course that's not from English. It is chance similarity, chance similarity. It is accidental. It's just because it's very simple. It's just I, die, very simple. And of course, Vietnamese I, who. Samoan, which is an Austronesian language, also has I, which means who. Why, that's amazing. Are they related? No, of course not. There's a Proto-Malayo-Polynesian word, Sai. It's just that Samoan lost the S. And I'm not going to show you the samples, but there are a lot of Austronesian languages which have this word, and they have this S. It's just that Samoan, for some reason, does not. Okay, I don't know the history of Samoan phonology, but that's what's happened here. You can see that's what's happened. It is chance similarity. And this is not borrowed into Vietnamese and Vietnamese lost an S. There's none of that. There's no evidence for any of that. It's very simple sound. This is I, die, here's I. It's very easy for languages to have these sounds, and by coincidence, they are similar sometimes. Okay, very important. I hope you understand what I'm showing you here, because it's very important to understand just because two words sound similar in two languages doesn't mean very much, especially when it's one little simple syllable. These are very small, simple syllables. Vietnamese gà, chicken, and Cantonese gai, gai, but Proto-Vedic rca. So they're not related. Vietnamese and Cantonese, no, these are not related. Proto-Vedic rca versus Old Chinese gai. These are not very similar when you look at them, are they? Proto-Vedic rca and Chinese gai, or Old Chinese gai. So no, they're not. Okay, the superficial. They look a little bit of similar. No, they are not related. Okay, very simple syllables. Limited data leads to false conclusion. Chance similarity happens much more often than many realize. Chance similarity happens much more often. Okay, so focus on those language reconstructions. That's what's important. And we go, oh, okay, no, this Vedic form and this Chinese form are different. The Vedic people did not borrow the word for chicken from Chinese people. They did not. This is its own native word. By the way, it's not an Austroasiatic, this word for chicken. It is only in Vedic. So somehow it may be innovated by Vedic people. I don't know. There's no archaeological evidence for that, so we don't know. Okay, seek phonological patterns and beware of phonological irregularities. Okay. So these are examples of claims of loan words with um, phonological inconsistencies, among other problems. And I'm not going to go over these too much, but this is in that article I published, and I had to say this is not good data, suggesting that these words, these scholars suggesting, these are not linguists, suggesting that these words are related. And I think you can look at them and you can see this does not look at all similar. I don't know why they did that. This word lao for llama, you know, it's just, it has a little bit of some parts of it. There's no consistency. I wish they had not done this. And this just creates confusion, okay? Suggesting that somehow Vietnamese and Malay were exchanging words. We don't see the patterns here. It looks very random almost, but that's what they said had patterns. So let's see what some patterns look like, okay? So the Vietnamese G sound, and it's this IPA, International Phonetic Alphabet. It's actually a g, a kind of a fricative g, as in gao, the husked rice. In Austroasiatic and Vedic come from words with, I'm going to use this technical term, pre-syllabic material. Many instances of this becoming g. I'll show you what this means. Okay, so you can understand when I show you the examples. Here are words in Vietnamese that have this ga sound, ga, ga, gang, gup, gai, got, gai, get, gup. And we have these Proto-Vietic reconstructions. All of them have K, and all of them have a consonant in front of the K. Every one of them. Okay, these are Michel Ferlus's reconstructions that I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the talk, and it's pretty consistent. Okay, this is good. This is this is a pattern. And as for the shins, you can see get, the get, and we can see gup, backup, and gang, tkang, well, gang, tkang, ga, rka. I think you can see patterns here. I hope you can see the patterns. This is complicated, but we just don't have R at the ends of words in Vietnamese, but there is R at the ends of words that are other Vedic languages. And some of the consonants change. This is a tick, like a CH in Vietnamese, but modern Vietnamese has a T. But these are all explainable. These are patterns. This is what we want to have, okay? Not this. This is not acceptable. Okay? We must see strong patterns to be able to make the claims. Okay, accept only limited semantic flexibility. Let's see here. Oh, okay, good. Oh, okay. Yeah, my time is reasonable. Yeah, we lost our 15, but I think I've got it here. Okay, so, whoops, I didn't want all three to appear at once. Too late now. Avoid excessive creativity in positing semantic changes. So let me show you what I mean. Here are claims of cognates, that means the related words, in Vietnamese and Indonesian, with vague semantic relationships, vague, not very clear, mixed phonological similarities, okay? And sorry, Gregerson, 1991, but I have to do this. And so here's Vietnamese. He presents Vietnamese lo, long time luon, and suggesting that some reconstruction of Austronesian here, laon, and Bahasa Indonesia here, laon, And I think this is Paiwanic there in Taiwan. And okay, well, that kind of maybe vaguely seems similar. It doesn't look like Lao because Lao doesn't have a final N. And we see this Luan, it kind of looks a little bit like it, but Luan itself has other meanings. I don't know. It's a little bit too flexible. Rat, very, and we have this word here for heavy, Bahasa Indonesia there, berat. And oh, well, how is that related to very? I guess he's getting very creative, too creative. It's not consistent. Uh, Here is lam for very, and then he's giving that's a Jam language, lam for very. Well, that's interesting, but I don't know that it is related to salama as long as. I don't think that's what this is. And it also has a certain tone. Vietnamese has a tone. And if you pay attention to the tone, then you would know that these don't work because it would have a different sound because of the tone. So this is what I mean by being too flexible with the semantics, and then you can kind of just create any idea you want. You can create any idea. So for the phonologically supported claim of cognates of gao for husked rice in Vietnamese, 9 of 13 branches, they all are for husked rice, not cooked rice, not patty rice, not sticky rice, but husked rice. It's very specific. And if we look back at that panel, we will see the word husked in all of the branches. We know that this is not just any rice, it is husked rice. That is stronger because it's consistent. The Vietnamese word nam for the kind of winnowing basket. And there are probably words like this in several Austroasiatic languages, such as Proto-Katuic. It is also in Proto-Dye with this dong. Now I'm showing you this here, the N and this D here with the little hook. That means it's what we call an imploded sound. So in Vietnamese when we pronounce dong, we don't just say duh, but it's imploded dong. For the currency dong, may dong. So the D here is that kind of thing, and that becomes N in Vietnamese. So that's what we expect. But they are all specifically for the winnowing basket, not just baskets in general, but winnowing basket. It's much more semantically specific. That is a good thing. So this is what I mean. Don't be flexible. Try to be specific. That's what we have to do. We have to be creative where creativity is important, but we don't want to just create anything, okay? We have to find patterns as much as possible. Now, consider the archaeological and ethnohistorical research, but do so carefully, do so carefully. Make some friends with an archaeologist, yes. Okay, Proto-Austroasiatic words related to rice or rice production. We have that. Then we have this proposed migration of rice-producing groups from southern China. Okay, so if we see words in Proto-Austroasiatic which are related to rice or to rice production, and we have archaeological studies suggesting that some groups producing rice move down into mainland Southeast Asia, then we feel more confident. Okay, Proto-Austroasiatic people have these words, and archaeologists say there's evidence of this rice production. And so we can feel more confident about those words, about claiming the history of those words. All right. Of course, I mentioned the pineapple and papaya, right? We excluded based on that. Numerous Chinese cultural objects, we know that's in the historical record. It's somewhat in the archaeological record. And we have corresponding, I'm going to call them pre-Sino-Vietnamese, early Chinese loanwords. So Lua is from the Chinese word Zhu. I think that's the one we use in Taiwanese. I suddenly forgot that. What's the Taiwanese word for chopsticks? I suddenly forgot that.
T.
believe it or not, dua is related to di. I know that sounds bizarre, but that's actually, it's just that this is from very old form. And then zai or for zhi, and gum for jian, and vang from huang. Okay, and I won't go through the evidence for this, but there is solid phonological evidence for all of these. They match phonological patterns, and we have historical and archaeological evidence for these. And so, oh, okay, we can connect them to this ancient period. All right. Um, Here's one instance: Vietnamese mit for jackfruit. Oh, tasty jackfruit! I like jackfruit. It is not likely borrowed from Chinese, even though it is when it's written in Chinese. It hannom it's me there, for it has a different meaning, of course, honey, and is also, this is crucial. Jackfruit is a tropical fruit which is indigenous to Southeast Asia, not China. A Vedic loan into Chinese is more likely. Um, and so the reason I'm mentioning this is I gave a presentation last year in Vietnam. I did that in Vietnamese. It's one of those one of the videos that I put in the slides here, and I mentioned this. And so a Vietnamese person wrote somewhere on the internet. He saw my talk or something, and he said, "Oh, no, no, it has to be from Chinese. It has to be borrowed from Chinese." And I said, well, that's a problem because jackfruit is not grown up in Beijing. It's grown down south. And we just have to look at this kind of information. But I'd have to check it more carefully. I'm not an expert in ethnobotany. Maybe I need a friend who is a ethnobotanist. That's what I need, a new friend in ethnobotany. But I think this is probably accurate. And so we can check that information to know. Okay, so I've covered the semantics, phonology, archaeology, semantic cultural domains. I mentioned that idea of cultural domains before. So avoid reliance on words without counterparts in domains. That is, just one word, just alone. I would prefer to find groups of words that are in one domain, such as rice production, right? That's a cultural, a semantic domain, maybe a cultural domain. So some domains of Austroasiatic or Vedic etyma, various aspects of pre-Qin lifestyle. So pre-Qin clothing, pre-Qin household objects, pre-Qin native produce, fruits and vegetables and such. Rice production, I've mentioned it before and we're mentioning it again. Function words, that means grammatical words. And so numbers have kind of function, pronouns, locational words. All of these in Vietnamese are either Austroasiatic or Vedic. Okay. In contrast, domains of Chinese loanwords, and I'm going to focus on the early Chinese loanwords of like the Han Dynasty, Jin, the East Jin or something like that. Literacy and education, metals and a variety of metal implements, Chinese style items of the household, words related to silk and silk production. Okay, so I'm going to show you some examples of this silk and silk production. All right, this is a semantic domain. So early Chinese loanwords of silk production. When I say early, I mean before the Han Viet. I mean before the Sino-Vietnamese words, which are, maybe about 1,000 years ago. This is perhaps 1,500 years to 2,000 years ago, early Chinese loanwords. And so uh, here, ECL means these early Chinese loanwords. Okay, maybe just take a moment to process that. So these are the words I'm talking about because these are the words that people use, Vietnamese speakers use. Okay, these are the pronunciations of these words when they are the Chinese characters. So s here is the, but when you're speaking Vietnamese, you say the for silk, okay, for the substance. And then let's try Jan here for cocoon. and you have Gien. That's the pronunciation if you're reading this character, but Gen for spoken Vietnamese. Okay, and so these are the early Chinese loanwords. These are the later ones. These are the Sino-Vietnamese ones. Okay, this is pre-Sino-Vietnamese, and as you can see, silk the substance, silk the fabric. um, to embroidered silk, silkworm, cocoon, embroider, and even to slough of skin, lo za. And so this one, I was kind of surprised, but these are the old Chinese reconstructions here, the Baxter and Cigar reconstructions. And I'm not going to discuss them, but I can tell you that the patterns work. Oh, remember I said that the G sound had some kind of complex stuff at the beginning? And that's what this has. It has some complex stuff here, something like grum, okay, for gum. And so, oh, it's exactly what we want. And the tones are good. And I'm not going to explain all of the phonology. I don't have time for that, but they are proper. They have proper phonology, and so and we are in a complete semantic domain. It looks pretty much like silk production, at least the Chinese style of silk production, was brought to Vietnam in this early period. That's what this suggests. Okay. Now I would need again. I need an archaeologist to check this out, and I've been checking. There's one archaeologist who does work on the textiles, and I've shown her this stuff, and she's interested in it. But I have to check a little bit more. But okay, see what time is it? Okay, let me see. So review key points here. We have looked at sources of data, the textual, lexical reconstructions, ethnohistorical data. We've looked at methods of data analysis. Use it all, use it well. And I've mentioned my concerns about poor methodology. I'm sorry. And there are effects beyond linguistics of this poor methodology. It's not just affecting linguistics, right? It affects history, claims about history. So we want to be careful about it. So this is what I have for this second hour. I'm going to stop.